Hey Peyton, nice to see you again on this beautiful day. And this time with a quote by engineer Harrington Emerson from July 1911. He wrote, "As to methods, there may be a million and then some, but principles are few. The person who grasps principles can successfully select their own methods. The person who tries methods, ignoring principles, is sure to have trouble." So, what do you think about principles versus methods, and which principles are very valuable in your life? And why even use principles?
Hmm. Wonderful topic. This has been a curiosity and an interest of mine for a very, very long time. I think that this is my own personal opinion, one of the big blind spots of our education system. If we think about, for instance, how we teach mathematics in school, we might teach certain specific processes and steps that people memorize and then have to go through. But what is the issue with this? It's that after summer break is over, you forget the steps that you memorized through repetition 4 months ago, and you're back to square one. It's not cumulative in its nature. Whereas if you truly understand the concepts, the first principles, if you become numerate from the ground up, then it's for keeps. And this applies, of course, not just to elementary or high school mathematics, it keeps applying in all of these domains in our life, where if we understand the root, the distilled down first principles of something, we can stand on solid ground. We can stack a brick of a first principle or concept into the construction of our mental map, so to speak, and it stays there. It's for keeps because we learn it, we understand it, we went slow and we went small and we boiled it down and we asked the dumb questions to get all the way back down to truly trying to understand something, and then we can stack it right in there and keep it. Whereas if we just memorize steps on how to do something, then we might be able to accomplish a task or a set of tasks that are in front of us right now. But it's very unlikely that we can take this, grab it, hold on to it, put it in our pocket, and be able to apply that in another domain of our life, in another arena, or even in another year of our life when the setting has changed, when the technology has changed. And so but it's slower and more deliberate to try to learn things in terms of their first principles than it is to try to just stack on this sort of flimsy construction or this flimsy scaffolding that can enable us to reach higher faster, which is what we're tempted to do if we're just trying to do what's most expedient to accomplish the task at hand in this moment, or to try to look smart in this moment. And so this is two different approaches. One is counterintuitively, it's slower right now. It might not get as far for this task. It might not be the most expedient thing for the immediate surface level end that we're trying to accomplish with this task. But if we can step back in our learning and try to really make sure that we understand the core root first principles of what we're trying to get, then we actually can keep it. And not only keep it and apply it in this domain that we're talking about right now, but if we understand this root, we have a pattern that we can then recognize in other domains in our life. A pattern that we can recognize in business, a pattern that we can recognize in our own lifestyle, a pattern that we can recognize in our relationships, a pattern that we can recognize in the power structures of the world, and something that we can keep and recognize, hold on to, and apply very broadly and in the future, which is inherently going to be a different setting, even within the same domain, as the setting that we find ourselves in today. How do you think about what does it look like to try to find first principles? If we have a method that is in front of us, but we recognize that this might not be as valuable or as for keeps as the first principle behind us. What does it look like to have a rigorous approach to where we're not just satisfied with the surface level when we try to learn something, and we're really trying to get to the root of some subject that we're learning?
Well, that's a powerful question. First, look into history and try to boil down what you find there. Try to learn from everything which happened, and after that, um, now I hear myself double again. What is a principle in the first place is a question that I can answer. It is like a fundamental truth to you, like a subjective truth which helps to capture your reality, your thinking, your mode of being. And if you got to the point where you discovered that something is fundamentally true to you, and see, okay, if I if I am in my life and I try to have a good life, then the root principles for me, it's true for me that I have to have a good enough sleep to experience life in a good way. So the fundamental truth of living a good life is having most of the time having good sleep in the first place. So a principle boils down to what is true to you. And how do we find it? Yeah, through experimentation, through the pain of confrontation with reality, because sometimes we have illusions and we get disillusioned if things which happen do not meet our expectations. And this helps us to build a history, and then we can look back into a history and reflect, boil down, okay, what worked on what didn't work. And from there on, we can see and find patterns. It's slower to derive a pattern which we can say, okay, this is a situation which has been similar to this situation, and which led to similar outcomes. Do I like these outcomes, yes or no? And what kind of pattern and what kind of rule can I derive from my behavior, from the circumstances which appeared, and then from the outcome which happened after that. So it is, in essence, finding your principles is engaging with the world, making transparent what you did when and how, and when it felt painful, for example, and note that down, and then derive the patterns from the outcomes which are likable to you, and do more of these and avoid more of the outcomes which were unlikable to you, if you can find the patterns in the past in your life, and then project the patterns and pasts of other lives. So it is like a scaled approach. It's always looking back to find what's true for you through experimentation. This is my short answer for how to find principles for your own, and which approach. What do you think? How could you find like principles, life principles
Hmm.
for your own?
Yeah, I think it has to do with looking for patterns, or at least one aspect of finding useful principles is looking for patterns that apply at various levels of scale, various levels of sort of domain segments, various arenas that seem to be completely unrelated arenas. What are the patterns that are true across these various arenas? So, one of my favorite examples of a first principle where once you see it and you aren't satisfied with the surface level, but you drill down to what is the logic, what is the mechanisms, what is the pattern that I can recognize across these, is the pattern of natural selection. It is brilliantly applicable across just an insane amount of domains that once you see it and once you learn to look for it, you can see how you can expect these various domains in games to play out. It unlocks your view of game theory in a new way. And so, natural selection, in how I would describe it, largely comes down to fitness payoffs. And fitness payoffs largely come down to two things. One is your survival, and one is your reproduction. And so you can see this, of course, when you look out and you look at animals. This is the traditional classic example. You will see that Every animal has a good strategy or a set of tactics and strategies that's obsessed with survival. And so it's going to constantly have some monitor of its own safety. It's threat scanning, it's looking around, and it's going to have a whole set of mechanisms related to reproduction. It's going to have mating strategies that are everywhere from putting themselves around potential mates to learning how to select them in order that it will lead their offspring will be more likely to produce. It will have a way to attract a mate. It will have a way to ensure that the actual mating process leads to reproduction and creation in the next generation, blah, 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 blah. And you can see that almost all of the software that animals are running has to do with one of these two things and really trying to succeed at these well enough so that they get the full fitness payoff of their genes, go to the next generation, and then have enough legs to stand on that then they can pass it on to the next generation. Okay, now how does this apply to business? If you think about survival and you think about fitness payoffs of reproduction in business, then you can see how marketing and funnels apply, as well as how large organizational practices apply. And so you look at the operations, you look at the risk management, you look at the organization and the structure of the organization and its sort of immune system, so to speak, which has to do with culture. And there you can see the survival mechanisms. Culture has a lot to do with the quote immune system of the organization, fighting off parasites, being able to allocate resources, ensuring that the body can replenish and restore itself, which is hiring and bringing in new people, allocating the right amount of resources to the right functions in the system, and applying systems, sort of systems thinking, understanding the stocks and the flows, the resources, the calories of the system, how they're allocated in order that it can provide all of its functions and keep flowing. Then, importantly, and this is where I think you can really gain some insights and pattern recognition, is the fitness payoffs of an organization. This is how, so the effective sort of reproduction of a system has to do a lot in business with acquiring new customers in a new way. This is the way that you basically are taking what you have and multiplying and proliferating this unit economic activity onto the quote unquote next generation. And so you make a sale, you get revenue, you spend money to produce this thing, and you end up with profit. You have this profit, and then you apply it to go acquire new customers. Is a pattern that you can see in these businesses. And so the quote reproduction has a lot to do with the reproduction of the unit economics, the reproduction of your business cycle, the reproduction of you going and finding people who need something that you create and making that sort of that acquisition of a customer, the acquisition of a sale is the business equivalent of this reproduction. This is what keeps you flowing on to the next generation. This is what brings energy into the system that then can go and proliferate. And so if you understand this, you can then look at, okay, how do a lot of parasites tack along? How do a lot of predators take advantage of these animals that are trying to reproduce out in the wild? They actually go to the place where there's breeding grounds. They go to the place where there's spawning grounds. Or if you're say a virus, you actually try to insert your way into the population at the time of copulation. And so you see this, and then you look at, okay, how do a lot of people try to get a slice of the resources going into a business? They actually go to the place where the fitness payoff, the reproduction event is happening. That's when you have lead aggregators that come in and say, hey, I can help you, quote, reproduce. I can get you more customers, but I'm going to need, instead of just a flat fee for what I do, instead of just a small fee that has to do with the cost of my inputs, I'm going to charge you based off what it's worth. I'm going to charge you 10% of the revenue of the leads that I get you. This is that choke point in the funnel where, because an organization wants to reproduce so bad, go find more sales, actually this is a power leverage point where you can insert yourself into business. It's the same thing as when a predator is camping out at the breeding grounds of certain animals, or take a grizzly bear that is in the river where the salmon is swimming upstream and catching the salmon in its brain and its mouth and eating 10% of these salmon. This is the equivalent of a lead generator coming into a business and saying, hey, I'm going to help you I'm going to help you sort of on your way to reproduction. I will cross a bridge for you to acquire new customers, but I'm not charging you $50 an hour. I'm charging you 10% of the revenue I bring you. Do you want to do it or not? And this is where you can have some really big unlocks because you're finding that point of their fitness payoff, their reproduction, so to speak. And the same thing is true in governments. The same thing is true in power structures. But the fitness payoff of somebody looking to get elected is not trying to acquire a new customer, of course. The fitness payoff of somebody trying to maintain and consolidate or grow their power happens in democracies. It happens in elections. In old school or more monarchical or oligarchic systems, there's a different mechanism of payoff. It has to do with a lot of times your ability to consolidate the power of the key holders of the more decentralized power that's one layer down. How do you build this, build and maintain this sort of coalition of the main power structures of whatever system you find yourself in? And a lot of times that has to do with flow of resources. A lot of times it has to do with it varies between different systems depending on how big or small or the geography, et cetera. But it's really identifying these points of what is the thing that hands off and maintains and sustains the power. This is the core fitness payoff of power games and governments. And so that's why you can see senators, they will say one thing, but what will they go and do? They will go and do big pharma's bidding because that will give them the campaign donations that will then take them to the next generation, to get them through the next election. They're saying one thing with their mouth, but in reality, all senators, all House of Representatives, all people that are in democracies are doing what leads to the next fitness payoff. That's the incentives you can expect them to follow. And the reproduction, as it's so to speak, from somebody that's in Congress is winning the next election. How do you win the next election? What leads to you getting and finding and successfully mating, so to speak, in that arena? It's having a really good campaign, and so you just want to not piss off or alienate your base while you're consolidating as much of these resources as possible, so you can mass deploy it to successfully use your incumbent position to maintain your power and propagate it throughout to the next generation, the next election cycle being kind of the next generation in a democracy. So this pattern you can spot, you can see, and you can expect how organizations or you can expect how agents are going to behave based off of identifying, okay, what is the survival mechanism at play that's within this arena? That must happen. And so for a senator, it's don't piss off your base so much that they won't show up and vote for you or you're going to get primaried or whatever. And then what is the reproduction function in this mechanism? So it's winning the election, it's acquiring the next customer, or it's, of course, in nature, it's finding a mate that you can successfully reproduce with and the offspring will survive. And so that's one example that I love applying. And it actually applies to star systems,
Mhm.
it applies to supernovas, it applies, of course, at an atomic scale. It has to do with the composition of atoms in our universe, as well as many, many games that play out in between. And it's fascinating to think about. This is one first principle that I love. Do any other come
So,
to mind for you of these things that can apply across domains?
so it seems, yeah. So it seems what you talked about is the natural selection, and then you can analyze a system according to its incentives, and then project its likely behavior after that. So the boil down of this to derive a principle from what you said is, in my opinion, you can analyze the system, spot and describe its incentive structure, and then put it in different environments with different initial conditions. And but then you can derive the likely behavior of a system from that. So it's all about finding the choke point and the power of the leverage point. And then I thought about the difference between the political system in Switzerland and in America. Though Switzerland is much, much smaller than America, it is much, much more decentralized. So mm, you can much easier inject your political not only ideology but also the lawmaking part where um, people change laws so that big corporations have more upsides.
Lobby?
What are the names of the people who sit there and talk to the lobbyists? Yes, the lobbyists. And in a centralized system, lobbyists have
Yes.
a much easier time to convince one politician, and they only need to make one big present, and then they have like an upside for life because it gets baked into the law. Whereas in Switzerland, it's like a direct democracy. The president changes every year or so, I don't remember. Um, and then the top political people are seven in total. So you have like decentralization to the max. They travel with public transport without bodyguards and so on. So they don't have any kind of big status whatsoever. So it's much harder for ideologies or for lobbyists to take root in the political structure of Switzerland, because in the end the people have a direct vote on matters which influence their lives. So the more centralized the system is, this is now the principle I derive from that,
Yes.
the easier it is for parasites or parasitic ideas to be injected. The more decentralized it is, um, the higher the likelihood of the survival of the whole structure. That seems to be with the case with Switzerland, one of the oldest democracies in the world, combined with America, I guess. Um, so it's always finding the leverage point where you can gain more resources to increase your fitness. So when we look into our life, where can we find a leverage points where we can invest our energy, invest our time, and gain an asymmetric upside? So this is another life principle you can maybe apply. Try to be effective in what you do. Try to look out for what you really want in life, and then figure out how to get it, but in an effective way. Invest a little bit of energy in and then see where on which place the upside is the highest. So it is finding the rule of Pareto. Which 20% are the most effective 20% to utilize and to apply? Um, yeah, this is finding patterns, trying to find out what is true, trying to circumnavigate your pain points through reflection, but also through honesty and transparency for yourself, so that you are honest to yourself what caused this pain, and then bit by bit disillusion yourself and deriving principles for your own life, which seems to be not too bad. So what do you think, Peyton? What is the core
Mm,
underlying process of
great
finding
question.
good
And
principles?
it does come back to what I think is a simple habit. So the world will present you all the time, every day, with surface level information. The world will tell you that if you want to go acquire customers, you need to go cold call them. Or um, if you want to go sell more, you need to follow a process. Or if you want to go um, save money, you need to look at the big things and cut them, or whatever the thing is that the world is telling you to do. You need to answer the phone more rapidly. You need to do this. You need to do this. All these tactics will come at you out of the blue all over. And there's so many of them that you can find two different people on two different sides of every single tactic. You can have one really professional, well reputed business consultant go and tell you that the way you want to grow your business early on is you got to be the most responsive guy possible. If 10 people call you, you got to answer all 10 times within one on the first ring every time, and you got to be the fastest person, the most responsive person ever. And maybe that method, that tactic worked for him. And then you find another guy that says the complete opposite. If you want to make it far as a business person, if you want to build a business successfully, the last thing you can afford is interruptions. You need a clear mind, you need deep work. You will do 5 times more productivity than the person that's just constantly chopping up their attention and being reactive. So you find two different tactics and they're opposite. And you can apply the same thing to oh, this person says you need a more custom bespoke business and that will lead to more success. This person says simplification and essentialism at all costs. This person says you can fill the gap in the market and you can fill 10 different gaps. This person says only do the one thing that you're the best at and find that one thing and refuse to do anything else until it's the one thing. And you're like, what the heck? There's conflicting advice on every single thing out here. And so how do I know what to do? And what I think is the root habit of this, it's no shock, no magic, whatever, but it's constantly asking why. It's constant critical thinking, and it's constantly trying to derive, refusing to accept this surface level tactic, this surface level method that somebody gives you. Never stop there and just accept what somebody tells you to do, even if it's somebody that you respect, even if it's good advice, without asking why. Why is it that you believe that I need to follow a sales process if I want to improve my sales? Or on this other side, why is it that you believe that I should never follow a sales process if I want to improve my sales? And then you can see that, okay, this person says follow this method of use a sales process. And when I ask why, and then I ask why, and then I ask why until I get to the bottom of his thinking, it comes out to, well, he really thinks that the sales process is the way that I can consistently share the value about my company and my product and my price. Sharing that effectively and consistently every time, that is accomplished well in this person's eyes by following a sales process. This person says never follow a sales process, only do it extemporaneous. And the reason why is because he says it's really important to listen to the person across from you. It's really important this person feels understood. It's important this person feels resonated with and empathized with. And when you understand that and you don't stop at the surface level of him saying, don't do this thing, you ask, well, why not do this thing? Okay, because it would feel like this. Okay, why is it bad to feel like this? Because then they don't feel listened to. Okay, why is it bad if they don't feel listened to? Because then they don't like you and then they don't want to buy and that will affect your results. You're like, oh, okay. Now, because I asked why over here, I asked why over here, I realized that I can actually accomplish this part, asking questions, listening, letting them lead, and I can accomplish this part, make sure to share the value of the company, make sure to differentiate the product, make sure to justify the value of the price that they're paying for the value that they're getting. And I can recognize that, oh, both of these things can be true. They can be both and, but I never would have seen that if I would have just stopped at the method. You need to ask, 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 double click. And honestly, a great way to do this now is with AI, because a lot of times the methods that we read isn't a person that's right across from us, of course. It's something we see on the internet, something we see on Twitter, something we see in our email inbox. It's something that we read in a book, etc. We can't really have a dialogue. Now with artificial intelligence, we really can try to distill, boil this down to the first principles and ask, why does this work? When does this work? In what circumstances is this important? And really trying to strip away the surface method. Never stop at the surface. Never accept something on face value, but always be in the pattern of thinking critically. Not that we're cynical about what we see. By no means. We must be open. We must be optimistic. We must recognize that by the very nature of us not being all the way where we want to be yet, we have things to learn. We have things to acquire and grow and ideas and tactics and principles from other people. But we don't want to treat anybody as if they are our oracle and we have no place in thinking. We must critically think and preserve the critical thinking all the way. Then we can gain the principles and we can gain the habit and the meta skill of, in fact, gaining principles. Once we have the principles, then we can survey the methods that fit the principles, and we're on a firm foundation. We understand why something is working or not working, and then we're in a better position to adapt the methods to the realities of our circumstance, our offering, our mission, our geography, our setting, our stage of the game, and our own strengths and weaknesses. And that's where we can really have a much more effective way of swimming these waves or swimming these currents. How do you think about this habit? What do you think when you think about getting the
Mhm.
principles when you're presented with the methods?
Well, it's a great habit to always boil down to its root. If it's like for the cause, I'm being curious, not necessarily in a relationship asking why did you do that? Why? That is
Good
probably
principle.
counterproductive, but if you're in production, because yeah. Production systems and companies don't have big feelings, but people in relationships do. So if you want to drill down to the root cause, then ask about the production system and drill down to why. That's a great habit to apply curiosity to find the root cause. And then this comes to mind, what is a good explanation? And David Deutsch, the godfather of the quantum computer and the mathematics behind it, says a good explanation is very hard to vary. It depends on the least set of variables. Um, Therefore, if you tell a story about, okay, why does winter exist? Okay, the Greeks, in the Greek myth, they told the story, okay, and there's this one goddess which flees from Hades, from the underworld, and goes out, and every time this year she goes out, and then Hades tries to chase her back again, and then the whole world gets cold and so on. So this is an explanation, but what are the variables in this? Okay, it's all the personas, it's all the mythical creatures and figures and circumstances which have to come together to make it work. What if it's like Diana, not Hades, not Hades? What if at this time in the year, but on the other side of the world, on the southern hemisphere, for example. And then you get all these possible variations, so you can define a bad explanation with an explanation which has many variables. And to get to good explanations, which you can use as a decision-making criterion, which you can use as principles, state your own principles, which you can use for decision-making criterion, you can come to good explanations through boiling down to the root cause and to the points where you don't have much many variables anymore, and find a good explanation. For example, why does winter exist? Because of the angle of the sun hitting the earth at a specific spot, a specific geography. So this is a boiled down explanation, but it is better than the mythical creatures which have to chase someone every year and then catch them every year again. That's why there's differences and so on. But why are there differences? So yeah, good
Mhm.
explanations are very hard to vary. So are good principles. And then it's only conjectural knowledge as well, you know. Your own principles, you derive from your own pain through reflection. You try to find patterns and reason through the cause and effect relationships and so on. But you always conjecture them. You don't really know whether these principles are true every time. But at least you can derive your decision making depending on the situation you are confronted with. So this is the strength as well of a good explanation and a good principle. You can just use it and derive from there. Oh, this is another situation. Oh, now I'm another part of the world, but the principle is, okay, be friendly with other people and maybe they help you. So this is hard to vary explanation. People are friendly if you are friendly, because they reciprocate your energy. Um, doesn't matter where you are, in which situation. So with the principle, you can deal with many situations at once.
I do have some
So
life
do you have
principles,
life
and
principle?
one thing I
Yeah,
want to add to that
you
too
want to add?
is our rigor in actually boiling down our solutions from method all the way to first principles. The other side of that coin of how we think about our solutions and how we distill our solutions is how we distill our problems. And this is something that I learned from EOS, which is a system that small businesses use to operate. And it's very rigorous about defining the root issue. And this is a practice that we can apply in our own life as well as, of course, in business and what we're trying to accomplish. And an example of this would be if someone comes to the meeting with the idea of, hey guys, we need to put new wraps on all of our trucks. The current trucks look bad. And you ask, okay, what is the root issue? And because if we're addressing it at the level of the trucks and the trucks being good or bad, then we're kind of fixated on there's this tactic, this method, this framing of the question that's incredibly narrow. But the reality is that this is a decision about trying to accomplish some goal with some amount of energy and some amount of resources. And so the right question is not, should we rewrap the trucks? Yes or no. Are the trucks currently ugly and would they be prettier at the end? Yes or no. Because that traps you into a certain arbitrary framing where how do you assign a value on what these truck wraps are worth or if they're the priority right now or this and that? To get to the root issue, then you might say, okay, why do we want to rewrap the trucks? Why does it matter if the trucks look bad? And then somebody says, well, it doesn't come across that good. Okay, so the next issue is why do we want our trucks to come across good? Okay, because then it will get presented, then we can actually have a better reputation. Okay, why do we want a better reputation? Okay, because ultimately we want to be able to generate more leads and have more sales and command a good price. Okay, now we're finally at the root issue. It has to do with the demand of the company. And so now that we're on the root issue is, okay, in fact, the ultimate reason we want prettier trucks is because we want more people to call us and we want more people to want to go with us because we are perceived better by the people that are our potential customers. Now you can have the question of, okay, are we better off spending $40,000 on these new trucks, or are we better off spending $10,000 on repainting our building? Or are we better off spending $10,000 on creating a video that we can send to all of the people that requested an estimate and controlling our perception in advance? Or are we better off spending $5,000 on some community engagement project and where we really get our name out there? Are we better off spending $1,000 a month on having a person be an ambassador for our brand in the community with 10% of their time? Now that we're on the root issue, it opens ourselves up and we're thinking we've distilled it down. We haven't accepted the surface level issue with the surface level method. The more rigorous way to address, solve, and identify problems is to say, why is that important? Okay, why is that important? Okay, why is that important? What is the root of what we are trying to accomplish here? And then we can look at, okay, what are all of the ways that we can allocate energy and resources to solve this problem? This is the other side of looking for the root principles, is being very rigorous at defining the root issue rather than assuming that the first way that we frame the surface level issue is the level on which we should be thinking about the action plan that we should make about it. So this is the other side of it.
Hmm. This reminds me of a quote from Peter Drucker where he says, most serious mistakes are not being made as a result of
Mm.
wrong answers. The truly dangerous
Yes.
thing is asking the wrong question. And yeah, oh, how should we paint our trucks now? Like, is the wrong question. You can have many right answers to that one, but it is less effective according to the root challenge you want to solve. Therefore, you have to find the unasked questions and, and then boil it down to the problem which arise, and then yeah, separate the problem from the symptom. You see, because the truck color is only a symptom, but you don't experience maybe many people coming to you and being leads um, from you. And then you have to check your assumptions again. And then you have to check the consequences of your decisions. If you would do A, what kind of consequences would spiral down from that? If you would do B, what kind of consequences would spiral down from there? And then you can have like more and more ideas about how to solve the root cause of the root problem, and then you can systematize the solution for that specific challenge. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Ask the right questions, or at least don't ask yourself only the wrong questions and move on from the wrong questions and get closer to
Yeah.
the right
Yep. Which can
questions.
be hard to do. It can be less comfortable than this thing that's more concrete and simple and straightforward to open it up to the whole realm.
Hmm. Yeah, but with better choices you make,
Yes.
you will have a better life. So there's also Tony Robbins who says the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask yourself. So not only with that, we can derive good principles how to deal with the root issues. And from our good principles, we can spiral out so many methods and so many methodologies, but they are at the core pointing
Mm,
towards the direction
indeed.
we want to go. So with that, any any last
No,
ideas, principles you want to
I'm
share,
inspired to look
or
at
closing thoughts?
the underlying patterns more this week, to kind of bring some more rigor into my thinking, to expand my awareness of the underlying principles, because I'm sure that there's specific aspects or questions that I'm trying to solve or problems that I'm looking at in which I'm totally on this and I'm boiling it down, I'm distilling, but of course there's many, many that I'm just operating at the surface level without critically thinking about what lies beneath, what is moving and shaping this, what are the patterns that underlie this that should inform how I'm understanding what I'm working with here. And so bringing some more critical thinking and rigor and just looking at where are my blind spots on this, where am I just operating at the level of methods rather than truly stepping back and looking at this from first principles. And I would say that a bellwether for that for me is when I feel like I'm just running in place. Like when there's a red queen effect and I feel like I'm running, 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 but I'm staying in the same place with what's going on. That I think is a bit of an indicator for me on I'm probably just trying a bunch of tactics rather than really stepping back and looking at what needs to be true for this whole thing to work and flow and achieve as I would want it to. So that's a bit of what I'm going to be looking out for this week. There's a few arenas of my life that I sense that I could use some more rigorous thinking to really move the needle and get different results that are for keeps. And so I'm inspired to take a look, think critically, ask why, think in systems, think in terms of energy, recognize some of these patterns, and try to use that understanding of what's at the base to really steer things in an effective direction with some traction. How about you, man? What do you think you're going to try out this week, or what's going to be on your mind?
Nice. Yeah, I will try the approach that you mentioned, using AI for structuring data from order from chaotic myopic thinking maybe into structured thinking, and try to have this back and forth facilitated to drill down to root issues of, okay,
Mm,
how can I get my first customers, for example? Okay, how can I make my prompts page, my prompt library more effective in generating leads? How can I provide more value which is seen by people? And from there, ask myself better questions and execute. This is
better
the aim
questions.
this
Yeah,
week.
this is a meta skill that gets more important by the year. The answers now are more and more abundant and better that are kind of automatic from these systems. The questions to ask, what to seek, what to prioritize, what is the root issue, what do we ultimately want, what is the base level on which we are trying to manifest something. These questions, the quality of our questions is such a good opportunity for us to be intentional about. There's more and more power to asking really good questions every day. So good intention from you. I'm gonna steal that one myself.
Nice.
Thank you, bro.
Okay,
I will
see you
talk to you
next
next
week,
week.
my
Have a good
friend.
one.